The night didn't begin with fire, it began with silence. That kind of silence that presses on your chest, that feels too heavy for midnight. Beyoncé had been awake for hours, unable to sleep, pacing through her house in Los Angeles. Her phone was full of messages, producers talking about the final mix, stylists asking about the next shoot. She ignored all of them. Her thoughts kept circling back to one place, her studio, her second home, her heart outside her body. So when her phone lit up with an unknown number at 3:14 a.m., she almost didn't answer. Almost. But she did. And all she heard was one word: fire. Her car door slammed. The city blurred. By the time she reached the street, smoke was already pouring into the sky like black silk twisting in the wind. The smell hit her before she saw the flames. Sharp, chemical, real. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She ran. She didn't even notice she'd left her shoes behind until the gravel cut her feet. The studio, her studio, was gone. The same walls where she'd recorded songs that made the world dance were glowing red, cracking, falling in on themselves. The logo over the door melted and dropped like tears. For a moment, she didn't breathe. She just stared. People shouted her name, voices of firefighters and guards merging into noise. Cameras flashed from far behind the police tape. She didn't care. She walked closer until the heat kissed her skin. Someone grabbed her arm and pulled her back, yelling, but she tore free. She needed to see. She needed to feel it burn. Her memories flashed in fragments. Blue Ivy's laughter echoing in the hallway. A late-night jam session with Jay where they made a melody out of nothing. A note she'd left on the wall that said, "Don't chase perfect. Chase truth." All gone. Her eyes stung from smoke, or maybe from tears. The world around her blurred. Then she heard it. A sound beneath the chaos. Soft. Distant. Familiar. She looked down. Her phone had fallen onto the pavement, its screen cracked but still glowing. A faint melody played through the broken speaker, delicate, fragile, like a ghost whispering through static. It wasn't one of her songs. It wasn't anything from her playlists. It was her mother's voice, humming a lullaby from her childhood. The same song she hadn't heard since the night before her first big performance, when her mother whispered, "No matter how high you go, don't forget where your fire came from." Now that fire was everywhere, around her, inside her, consuming everything she had built and everything she thought she was. And as the studio collapsed, Beyoncé whispered into the smoke, barely audible even to herself, "Maybe this is where I start again." By sunrise, the fire was out, but the world wouldn't stop burning. News trucks lined the street like vultures, their lights cutting through the dawn haze. Reporters whispered her name, drones hovered above the ruins, and strangers online were already dissecting the disaster. Insurance scam. Publicity stunt. Album promo gone wrong. Beyoncé said nothing. She sat in the back seat of her car, her hands still covered in soot, staring through the windshield at what was left of her second home. A skeleton of twisted beams and shattered dreams. She didn't cry. Not yet. There was a numbness, deep and terrifying, where her feelings used to be. When the fire chief approached her window, his voice sounded far away. "We managed to save part of the ground floor. The rest is total loss." He hesitated before adding, "I'm sorry, ma'am. It must have meant a lot to you." She gave the smallest nod, the kind you give when you've already lost the words. Inside her mind, she replayed the night again and again. The flames, the sirens, the lullaby. That melody hadn't been real, had it? Maybe it was shock, or memory, or madness. But she could still hear it, faint and haunting, even now. She unlocked her phone, ignoring the dozens of missed calls, the messages from her team. She scrolled until she found the voice memo app. The most recent file was titled simply, Untitled_01. It was dated 12 years ago. Her thumb hovered over the play button. When she pressed it, her breath caught. Her mother's voice filled the car. Calm, warm, steady. "Baby, when life burns down what you built, don't rebuild the same house. Build a stronger one. You were never meant to stay safe. You were meant to rise from smoke." The recording ended, but the words kept echoing. Beyoncé leaned back in the seat, staring at the faint light breaking over the city. For the first time in years, she felt something raw, something real, not fame, not fear. A spark, she whispered to herself. Then maybe it's time to start from ashes. By the next evening, Her team had turned the tragedy into a crisis meeting. Lawyers, producers, PR managers, all gathered around a glass table in her mansion, voices overlapping, words sharp as knives. Insurance forms. Reconstruction plans. We can rebuild within 6 months. We'll leak a teaser to keep the narrative alive. She heard every word but didn't really listen. She sat at the end of the table, motionless, her hair tied back, a black hoodie hiding her face. Someone placed a bottle of water in front of her. She didn't touch it. Finally, one of the assistants said carefully, "Beyoncé, we need to know if there were backups of the masters. Do you remember where else the recordings might have been saved?" That was when something inside her shifted. She remembered. Not all of the songs had been kept at the studio. There was one project, her first personal demos, long before Lemonade, before the tours, before everything. Songs she had hidden because they felt too close, too vulnerable. She hadn't touched them in over a decade. They were stored on an old hard drive at her childhood home in Houston. For a moment, she felt like that 19-year-old girl again, the one who sang barefoot in her mother's kitchen, recording tracks on a cheap mic, dreaming of the world she would one day conquer. She stood up suddenly, the chair screeching across the marble. "I need to go," she said. Her manager blinked. "Go where?" "We have a press statement too." But she was already walking out. Through the hallway, past the trophies, the platinum records, the photos of her on stages across the globe. Every symbol of success now felt like a cage. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. She slid into her car, turned the ignition, and didn't tell anyone where she was going. The drive to the airport felt endless. Her phone buzzed nonstop, calls from Jay, from her label, from publicists desperate to control the story. She turned it off. For the first time in years, she didn't want to control anything. She just wanted truth. By the time her plane touched down in Houston, the sun was low and golden. The air smelled of rain and memory. As she walked through the old neighborhood, kids played basketball in the street. No one noticed her. It was perfect. Her mother's house still stood at the corner, white paint peeling, the porch creaking with the same familiar sound. She opened the door. It wasn't locked. Inside, dust floated in the sunlight like tiny ghosts. In the back room, behind a pile of boxes marked Beyoncé, old stuff, she found it. A small silver hard drive. Scratched. Ordinary. Forgotten. When she held it in her hands, her chest tightened. It felt heavier than it should, like it was carrying everything she used to be. The room was silent except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. Dust danced in the sunlight, settling on forgotten trophies and faded lyric sheets pinned to the wall. Beyoncé sat on the floor with the hard drive in her lap, staring at it like it might bite. Her fingers hesitated over the USB port of her old silver MacBook, the same one she hadn't touched since 2010. When the screen lit up, it flickered once, twice, then came alive. The desktop background was still there, a photo of her and her mom from Destiny's Child days, both smiling, both unaware of what the world had in store for them. She opened the folder named Heart Sessions. Inside were a few audio files, messy and unorganized, named things like beat_5_try2, demo raw, voice August_03, and then one file that made her pulse skip, heart_1, wave. She double-clicked. The screen froze for a moment. Then the room filled with her own voice, younger, rougher, more fragile than she remembered. "If I ever lose my voice, don't teach me how to sing again. Just let me listen. Maybe silence is another kind of song." She gasped. It wasn't the polished, perfect Beyoncé the world knew. It was the scared, hungry, hopeful version of her. The girl who wrote songs in her diary instead of her phone. The one who didn't know what marketing meant, who cried after every bad performance, who believed music could fix anything. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "God, I forgot this." The recording went on. Just her and a piano. No production, no beat. She hit a few wrong notes, laughed nervously in the background. But the song hurt. It was about fear, about burning out before the world ever saw your flame. Halfway through, she heard something else, another voice in the background, faint but clear. Her mother's. "Don't stop, baby. Don't ever stop." Beyoncé froze. The words echoed through the empty room like a ghost brushing past her. Her hands covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. That file wasn't just a demo. It was a message from the girl she used to be, and the woman who taught her to believe. And as the last piano note faded, she whispered into the quiet. Maybe the fire wasn't destruction. Maybe it was calling me back. For hours, she didn't move. The same loop of her younger voice played through the old speakers again and again, filling the air with every mistake, every breath, every bit of truth she had buried. Outside, the Texas night settled softly against the windows, the hum of cicadas mixing with the quiet rhythm of the song. Beyoncé lay back on the wooden floor, staring at the ceiling that once leaked during storms. She remembered writing those lyrics in this very room, back when the world didn't know her name, back when she didn't have to be perfect. She had written it for herself, for the girl who was afraid to fail. Now she realized, somewhere along the way, she had become everything she once promised she'd never be. Polished, controlled, untouchable, a brand instead of a heartbeat. The thought made her chest tighten. She sat up, rubbing her face with her hands, leaving faint streaks of black eyeliner on her palms. The house smelled like old wood and nostalgia, like memories she hadn't visited in years. She grabbed a notebook off the shelf, her teenage one, pages yellowed, corners folded. Inside, she found lyrics she had forgotten she'd written. Don't build walls, build windows. If it's too clean, it's not alive. Every line cut deeper than the last. She began writing again, the pen scratching furiously against paper. The words came out messy, uneven, but real. No metaphors, no filters, just pain and confession. Tears dropped onto the page, mixing with ink. She whispered to herself. Music was never about control. It was about letting go. Suddenly, she understood. The fire hadn't taken something from her. It had stripped away what didn't belong. The flames had burned through the layers of image, fame, and perfection until only the truth remained. She closed the notebook and looked at the old mic in the corner of the room. Dusty, cracked, barely functional. But she smiled. Because for the first time in years, she wanted to sing again. Not for charts. Not for cameras. For her. She stood, plugged the mic into the laptop, and whispered into the silence. Let's start over. And when her voice filled the room again, raw, imperfect, alive, it sounded like something reborn from ashes. The next morning, no one knew where she went. Her phone was off. Her car was gone. Her assistant called every hotel, every producer, every friend in Houston. Nothing. It was as if Beyoncé had vanished into thin air. In reality, she drove until the road stopped. A forgotten town, 2 hours outside the city, fields stretching forever, the sky wide and merciless. At the edge of the road stood a small wooden church, paint peeling, cross tilted with age. She parked the car, stepped out, and just listened. The silence here was different, heavy, alive. She pushed the old church door open. It creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside, the air smelled of dust and candles long melted to wax puddles. A single piano sat in the corner, half out of tune. She ran her fingers across the keys. A few worked, a few didn't. It didn't matter. Sitting on the worn bench, she whispered, "You still remember me?" And then, softly, she began to sing. At first, her voice trembled. She sang Hard_1 again, the old song, the one from the hard drive. No microphones, no headphones, no engineer to fix her mistakes. The echo of her voice filled the church, bounced off the cracked walls, and came back to her warmer, stronger. She didn't notice the janitor appear at the doorway, or the 2 elderly women who stopped outside to listen. Slowly, people gathered, strangers drawn by the sound. Some stood with eyes closed, some with hands clasped. It wasn't a concert. It was a confession. She sang until her throat burned. Then she sang some more. Between verses, she laughed, a quiet, trembling laugh that broke through the grief. When she finally stopped, an old woman whispered from the pew, "Child, whatever you lost, he's just giving it back in another form." Beyoncé smiled faintly. Maybe you're right. That night, she stayed in the church, lying on a wooden bench, watching candlelight dance on the walls. For the first time since the fire, she slept, not as the world's biggest star, but as the girl who had once believed music could heal anything. She came back the next night, and the one after that, and the one after that. Every evening, as the sun slid behind the fields, Beyoncé parked her car by that crooked cross and walked into the church carrying only her notebook and a bottle of water. No cameras, no stylists, no security, Just her and the piano. At first, she sang alone. Then the janitor, a quiet man named Samuel, began to sit near the back, tapping his foot to the rhythm. On the third night, the two elderly women returned. One brought a tambourine, the other hummed in harmony. By the end of the week, there were 15 people in that little church. A farmer, a teacher, a teenage girl who brought her guitar. None of them knew who she really was. They just called her B, and she liked it that way. Each night, her voice grew stronger, not louder, but freer. She sang *1 differently every time. Once as a whisper, once as a storm, once as a prayer. The walls seemed to breathe with her. The sound wasn't perfect. The mic she found in the storage room crackled, and the piano was stubbornly flat. But the music felt alive. One night, after the last note faded, Samuel said quietly, "You sound like someone relearning how to live." Beyoncé smiled, tired but glowing. "Maybe I am." When the others left, she stayed behind. The church was dark except for a single candle flickering on the piano. She pressed record on her old phone and began a new song. The words came like rain after drought. Heavy, unstoppable. I lost my crown in the fire, but found my voice in the smoke. She stopped, exhaled, and whispered to the empty room. "Okay, that's track 1. Outside, the crickets sang like an unseen choir. And for the first time in a long time, Beyoncé didn't feel like she was chasing anything. She was simply becoming. When she finally returned to the city, everything felt louder. The traffic, the voices, the screens flashing her name. It was as if the world had been holding its breath while she disappeared, and now it wanted to swallow her whole again. Her team was waiting in the driveway of her Los Angeles home. Lawyers in suits, assistants clutching clipboards, PR people rehearsing apologies. The moment she stepped out of the car, they swarmed her. "Beyoncé, we can spin this. The label needs a statement. People think you're done. You have to respond." She didn't. She just walked past them, her face unreadable, her steps calm and slow. Inside the house, everything looked the same. White walls, golden records, the scent of expensive candles, but it all felt hollow, like an echo of a life that didn't fit her anymore. That night, she sat in her private studio, the only untouched room, and stared at the blank calendar on the wall. Dozens of canceled shows, postponed appearances, empty squares. Her assistant knocked gently. "You still haven't told us what you want to do next." Beyoncé looked up. Her eyes were soft, but certain. "I want a stage," she said. "One night. One arena. No ads, no sponsors, no press." The assistant blinked. "What's the show called?" She thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "It's not a show. It's a promise." The next morning, she booked an entire stadium under a fake project name. No press release. No marketing. Just one date, March 14th. When her team asked what to post on her Instagram, she typed the caption herself. "For the fire that changed everything." The photo was pure black. No logo, no face, no text. Within minutes, the internet lost its mind. Was it an album? A film? A memorial? She didn't explain. She didn't need to. While the world tried to guess what she was planning, Beyoncé spent her days rehearsing alone in a small, dim rehearsal room. Just her, a stool, a mic, and that same cracked piano she'd brought from the church. Some nights, she fell asleep at the keys. Some nights, she cried mid-song and kept singing through the tears. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about truth. And as the date grew closer, her team began to panic. "Are you sure about no lights? No dancers? No pyrotechnics?" She looked at them quietly and said, "The only fire I need already burned." The night of the show arrived like a secret. No openers. No lights. No press. Just one stage in the center of the arena. Round, empty, silent. 50,000 people filled the seats, whispering, unsure what they were about to witness. At exactly 9 p.m., the lights went out. The crowd gasped. Then, a single white spotlight flicked on. Beyoncé stepped into it. No dancers. No band. No glitter. Just her in a simple black dress, barefoot, holding a mic. The silence stretched, so long you could hear people breathing. She looked around, at the faces, at the waiting, at the darkness, and then said softly, "This isn't a concert. It's a beginning." Her voice trembled on the first note, not from fear, but from weight, the kind of weight that comes from surviving. She sang the first verse of *1. The same song that had once existed only on an old hard drive in her mother's house. The arena was still, every echo of her voice climbing the rafters, melting into the dark. It wasn't flawless. Her voice cracked, a note slipped, but it didn't matter. Every imperfection felt alive. Halfway through, she stopped singing and whispered into the mic. "Do you hear that? That's what truth sounds like." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't scream. They just listened. Thousands of people sitting in silence, as if afraid to break the spell. Then she raised her head, and her next words came out like a vow. "I used to sing for perfection. Tonight, I sing for freedom." The music swelled, a single piano chord, slow and trembling, and she sang again, louder, stronger, her voice breaking and rebuilding in the same breath. And somewhere high above, near the roof of the arena, a small shimmer of golden dust drifted in the spotlight, like smoke that refused to die. When the final note faded, there was no applause. Only silence, the kind that lives in the chest, not in the air. Beyoncé stood perfectly still, eyes closed, hands trembling slightly around the microphone. Her heartbeat was the only rhythm she could hear. For a moment, she thought the audience might leave. But no one moved. 50,000 people sat in total quiet, the weight of her words pressing down like a prayer. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. Tears streaked her face, and she didn't wipe them away. She looked nothing like the queen the world was used to. No sparkle, no perfection, no mask. Just a woman who had walked through fire and come back singing. A murmur began in the crowd, soft at first, like wind moving through grass. Someone whispered her name. Someone else said, "She's crying." And then, as if the entire arena had taken one breath together, the lights bloomed back to life. They weren't stage lights, just a sea of phone screens, one by one, lighting up around her like stars. Thousands of tiny white lights flickering in the dark. Beyoncé looked up, her lips parting in disbelief. For years she'd commanded crowds with spectacle, but this was something else. No production, no perfection, just connection. She stepped away from the microphone, no longer performing, just being. She whispered, "This song isn't mine anymore." The crowd stayed quiet, every eye on her. And then, as if guided by something invisible, they began to hum. The same melody. Her melody. 50,000 voices joining hers. Fragile, imperfect, beautiful. Her knees almost gave out. She pressed a hand to her chest and laughed through her tears. In that moment, she realized she hadn't just rebuilt her music. She had rebuilt herself. The final chord hung in the air like smoke. Thin, trembling, eternal. Beyoncé stood in the center of that glowing circle of phone lights, her chest rising and falling, her tears glistening under the single spotlight. She didn't move, didn't bow, didn't try to fill the silence. She just let it breathe. Then she looked up. High above the arena, through the beams and shadows, something shimmered, not the cold light of a drone or a flash, but a soft, golden haze drifting lazily through the rafters. Like the last breath of the fire that once took everything from her. For a heartbeat, she thought she imagined it. But when she blinked, it was still there, swirling gently, catching the light, breaking apart into thousands of tiny sparks. The crowd saw it too. Gasps rippled through the seats, and a hush deeper than before settled over everyone. She whispered into the mic, voice cracking. "Do you see that? That's what survives." The audience didn't respond with cheers. Instead, someone shouted softly, "Thank you." Another voice echoed it. Then another. Soon the arena filled not with applause, but with words, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," whispered, shouted, cried from every corner, until it became its own rhythm, its own music. Beyoncé's hands shook. She pressed them together, bowing her head, overwhelmed. For years she had stood on stages built from power, money, and precision. But this moment was built from something real. Something she couldn't choreograph. When she finally spoke, it wasn't planned. Her voice was quiet, raw. "Everything I lost was just making space for this." The golden haze began to drift lower, catching in her curls, clinging to her skin like stardust. For a second, she looked less like a superstar and more like something timeless, not untouchable, but alive. She closed her eyes and whispered one last time, "Thank you for letting me start again." And as she stepped back from the mic, the lights dimmed to black, leaving only that faint gold glow hovering above the stage, the fire that had burned her world, now remade into light. The morning after the concert, the city felt different, quiet, softer, like it was still holding its breath. The world woke up to a flood of headlines. No lights, no dancers, just truth. Beyoncé reborn in silence. The night music became prayer, but she didn't read any of it. Beyoncé sat alone on her balcony, hair wrapped in a towel, drinking black coffee as the sun rose over Los Angeles. The sky was painted in gold and gray, smoke and light, together. Below, the street hummed faintly, life moving on, as if nothing miraculous had happened the night before. Her phone buzzed with hundreds of messages. Her team wanted statements. Late-night hosts wanted interviews. Every label executive on the planet wanted the rights to record that performance. She smiled faintly and turned the phone face down. On the small wooden table in front of her sat her old laptop, the same one from her mother's house. Its cracked screen still showed the last audio project she'd opened, Heart_1. Wave. Next to it was a notebook, half burned at the edges, filled with new lyrics written during those nights in the church. Her assistant knocked gently at the door. "B, the press is asking what to call the new record. We need a name before noon." Beyoncé didn't answer right away. She looked out at the city, the smoke rising faintly in the distance from another fire somewhere far away, and felt a calm she hadn't known in years. The fire had taken her walls, her image, her comfort, but it had given her something priceless, truth. Finally, she turned, her voice low but certain. "Call it ashes." The assistant hesitated. "Ashes?" Beyoncé smiled, eyes glinting in the morning sun. "Yes, because sometimes you have to burn everything you've built to remember that you were the fire all along." She closed the laptop, leaned back in her chair, and let the breeze carry the scent of smoke and roses through the open window. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, soft, imperfect, alive. And as the sunlight touched her face, she whispered the same words her mother once told her. "Don't rebuild the same house. Build a stronger one." Then she smiled, not as a legend, not as a brand, not even as Beyoncé, but as a woman who had finally come home.